I'm going to go ahead and get us started with an intro and a little bit of housekeeping here. So first off, good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to be here on Tuesday morning. I'm Dan Hobble of the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, and I'm really happy to have everybody here. And I'm very excited about this presentation this morning, Plotting Without Deception training. And I hope that you're also able to join us for part 2 on Thursday at the same time. So before I get into an introduction for Dr. Deshand, here are a few housekeeping items that I'd like to outline for folks. First, real-time computer transcription services are available during the training. I've put a link to this stream text service in the chat box, which you can click on to access the service. A suggestion is to go ahead and use a separate browser for the stream text so that you can do a split screen and then observe the training as well as access the streaming text. For speakers, if anybody speaks other than me or Dr. Deshand, please go ahead and identify yourself at the start of each contribution or conversation so that the captioner can identify you in the script and readers will know that the speaker has changed. And I also just want to thank the captioning service and the captioner for making this possible for us today. Secondly, I want to note to all participants that this training session is going to be recorded. If you do not consent to being recorded, please disconnect from the training at this time. And I'll go ahead and pause for a moment to let folks do that if they'd like to. All right, throughout the training, we ask that you keep your line muted. For everyone that's in this training session today, please don't share any protected health or personally identifiable information for people that you provide services to. So any discussions that occur, whether they're orally or via text in the chat, should only contain publicly shareable information. I also want to note that continuing education units or a certificate of attendance provided by DBHDS can be delivered to trainees that are here for the entirety of the training. And when I turn it over to Dr. Deshand here in just a few moments, he's going to describe what that process looks like for any of the behavior analysts that want to obtain the CEs. If you're a different type of behaviorist or a different type of professional that's here and you'd like a certificate of attendance, I have your information and I'll make sure that you obtain that from DBHDS. I'm going to monitor attendance for everybody and just to make sure that everybody that would like one gets one, which is contingent on being here for the entirety of the training session. Now, before I move forward with the intro today for our speaker, I want to note the following, just a couple of pieces of information. First is, and hopefully this was fairly obvious with the training announcement that went out, this is an advanced training topic on graphical display and visual analysis. Dr. Deshand may show some tools or techniques or suggestions and resources for trainees to consider in their own practice. And I have to stress for those that are here today that are currently providing therapeutic consultation behavioral services, or if you're interested in doing so in the future, these resources and recommendations here today, they're not a regulatory requirement that you do it specifically the way that Dr. Deshand is displaying. It is a regulatory requirement for therapeutic consultation behavioral services to provide data using an acceptable visual display. And before the training started, I went ahead and put links into the chat for the regulations that govern this service and also the associated practice guidelines for behavior support plans. So I essentially said the same thing at the intro training that I delivered last Thursday. But what I will say here is that we put this training series together as a way to provide info and resources to anyone that's interested in learning more on best practice in behavioral graphing and visual analysis. If you're not already aware of these particulars, what has been and will be presented will probably be extremely useful to you in your own practice. All right, with all of that noted, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the intro for our speaker. So I am very, very excited today to have Dr. Neil Deshand here today and on Thursday for this two-part training series. Dr. Deshand is an assistant professor at the University of Cincinnati, where he teaches applied behavior analysis courses in the Master's Online Distance program. He's worked extensively with individuals that exhibit behaviors that are dangerous to self as well as others, and consulted on crisis situations to ensure that people with such needs receive the least intrusive and most effective services possible. He's published on a variety of topics, including quality assurance of behavioral graphing practices, behavioral health, and creating interactive ethical decision-making tools. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Neil Deshand, part 1 of Plotting Without Deception.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I'm very gracious to be here and present for you guys. If you're hearing like a little beep, that is the entrance of people into the webinar. Someone just said it might be my clicking, but I don't think I'm going to do some clicking. Let me know if you guys can hear it. Can you hear that?
Tiny click.
You can hear the clicks?
I can hear the clicks.
Oh, wow. Okay, this microphone might be too sensitive, and I will try to minimize my. You know, I'll move it over here.
It's not distracting. It's okay. It's just very minor. We're doing visual analysis, not clicker training, everybody.
Okay. All right. Well, I apologize for that. And I've got this mic. It's very sensitive. So all I can do is do that. Is that better? Can you kill the clicks now?
I think you're good.
All right. Great. All right. Well, thanks for that. I didn't even realize that was possible. The thing about visual analysis is that, like Nathan said, there's an art to the science. I know some of you come from different backgrounds. Some of you are behavior analysts, some of you are behavior providers from other professions. So you guys know that Excel is kind of a tricky horse to ride, and that there are a lot of quirks to it. And having said that, many people have different flares or flavors to how they want to graph. The way I'm presenting isn't going to be the only way. This is the way I found to be effective in saving time, because really there's a lot of repetitive processes in graphing. And kind of the publications I've written about is how do you like take one step out of a task analysis and then translate it, even taking one step out for a field that's growing, saving 5 seconds in a day, times it by the providers that you have in your agency, times it by the year, it can actually start becoming quite a lucrative venture when you save time and actually start working with your clients. Now, the worst case scenario is spending all your time graphing and not actually being able to like work with your clients. So and then the importance of making great graphs also helps you make good clinical decisions. So it's a horse that's tried to buck us a couple times, but I want us to get on and see it. So I'm going to go ahead and share we've got the presentation up. Yeah, can you guys see that? Am I sharing it? I'm not sharing it. I'm not sharing.
Not yet.
All right. Well, here we go. Let's get a screen too. Here we go. You guys can see that now?
Yes.
Excellent. So inadvertently, we might accidentally do some practices that either through not knowing or just not having enough time, putting too many behaviors on a graph, it might become very difficult to review. Part of my work in behavior analysis, I had to do something similar to what Nathan's doing in quality assurance, look at graphs, make decisions. A lot of these decisions actually relate to not only services that we provide and what interventions we choose, what directions that need to shift, but also it relates to funding. So insurance agencies are probably going to keep requesting progress reports every tri-monthly, 3-monthly, or quarterly to see are we having the effects that we are intending to have. And that kind of regulatory oversight is probably necessary, but also it's important that they get trained in how to look at graphs as well as us. So this whole work is a balancing act. We've got to make sure that our graphs are easy to interpret so that we can train people to also interpret them. So it's not just us. Our graphs we're the only ones that can understand our graphs. That would be problematic in terms of interpretation. If you guys are joining now, make sure you add your names in the chat bar if you're intending to get CEUs, and that way I can keep track of everyone and go ahead and make sure that you guys get CEUs for the BCBA. Nathan has mentioned that you guys have had a quick training on how to do like basic graph elements, entering data. So you should have covered some of that information, how to enter some data, how to make a basic graph, a line chart or a scatter chart. So using the create chart function. You should also be able to copy and save files. I think that once you learn a trick, it isn't necessary for you to keep repeating that trick. Once you've learned it, you can make a template. Why go through the same step again and again and again? So one of the things I provide in this presentation for mostly on Thursdays, we'll be reviewing a set of templates that I've worked on every year. Every time I find something that's useful, whether it's automating a phase change line or finding a way just to change the name in a chart without having to go into the chart. So linking a cell in the cells in Excel on the sheet and linking it to a chart so that I don't have to go in and out, back and forth to make changes. So this is, it's a very time-consuming process. Any kind of trick like that, I think, is beneficial, even to the point of changing your date data without having to go in, adjust them manually each time. Can save a lot of time. So I've written some papers on chart language. Our charts, just as our verbal language, should be clear. They should be concise. There should be standards that we should all hold to. However, these standards are evolving because visual analysis, like I've mentioned, there's an art to the science. People are finding new ways to present data effectively to convince people about issues that are relevant to the human condition. With, for example, and this is just unrelated to behavioral data graphing, scientists have tried to ensure that they can teach people about climate change. Part of the issue was, first it was called global warming, but climate change also involves cooling and heating. So they had to adjust their language. But then some guys put together a background noise of radiation and heat to simulate the data change. And you can hear this, what starts as this quiet sound, getting louder and louder. That's a way to present data in an audio fashion. So it's important to recognize that when I'm talking about the behavioral data, I'll be talking about line charts and scatter charts, but people are exploring ways to present seismographs, 3-level variables at once, and people write on this topic. There are many, many books on presenting behavioral data, scientific data, and I want to go a little bit into the history of graphing in general. So for us, I'll mention one of our goals. If it doesn't enhance visual analysis, and visual analysis is being able to look at a graph and kind of do a statistical review. In behavior analysis, we aren't doing Cohen's D, we aren't doing significance testing, but we are looking at statistically significant changes. We have to be able to say there was an effect from our intervention. So I'll be going over how we look at an effect size, how do we look at the probability, whether it could be due to chance, whether there was an ongoing effect. So people in research papers talk about maturation. Well, with a person if as they get older, or as they got older, already make those improvements. And if someone's learning language, it's hard to argue, hey, this person who hasn't been speaking, that learns to speak through behavior analysis, through the verbal language acquisition programs, would have done so any other way. But it's still important that we track data, because a good verbal behavior program is going to capture all types of acquisition skills. So although some practitioners can say, hey, look, I did this, people want to see the narrative, the story, and a good storyteller uses graphs to present that data. So I mentioned that the standards keep getting revised. It depends on where you are. It depends on your state. As Nathan mentioned, what are the prerequisite steps? I don't actually know what they are for Virginia. I can just tell you what my experience has been for working in Florida, working in Michigan, and now in Ohio and Cincinnati. And so I think there's an argument whether you should use templates. I think it's a silly argument, but I prefer templates because it saves time in doing what we do, and then you can actually work with the clients. So that's why I provided the templates. And I think that papers that have argued with me about best practices, and there's really minutiae points that people get into, like, Neil, you missed this, you didn't do this. A lot of them don't provide templates. So, it's great that they're publishing a paper, but they're not actually providing resources to practitioners. And so I'm hoping this training bridges some of those issues from these research ideas to actually bringing it to people that can use them and actually save time. So the outline of this is we're going to look at the individual tracking individual data compared to group data. So we'll review kind of the differences in scientific analysis. A lot of people love group designs, but there's some issues with group designs, and there's some issues with single subject designs. It's not as though a group design means that you're going to be able to have the same effects at the individual level that we have by applying a cookie cutter kind of intervention. The success behavior analysis it has had is through individual subjects, has been through tracking individual data and customizing to each person. It's not that there isn't generality of the principles, it's just that everyone is unique and requires a tailored intervention. You should understand the essential elements of a graph. We've talked about having y-axes, x-axes, labeling them, making sure we know what a data trend is, knowing what a data path is, and then challenging ourselves to tackle issues that arise, such as overlapping data points. That means probably we've got a lot of data on one graph. Maybe it's easier to separate out the data or change the data point to avoid the overlapping issue. Now, overlapping might not be a terrible issue if you don't have lots of overlaps, but if it starts interfering with visual analysis, then it becomes an issue for us to resolve. So we've got to learn how to do that when those issues arise. So I call those threats to visual analysis. Anything that curtails your ability to make a clinical decision. Am I doing the right thing? Is the intervention going the direction I want it to go? And I look at the data and talk about trend, level, and variability. So the idea is that there's quality features and essential elements. Essential elements are the must-haves. The quality features are decent things you should have, making life easier for you and everyone else. Maybe Nathan too, when he reviews graphs. And I want to look at the benefits of unaggregated data. Like when someone says verbal outburst or they say aggression, but they include property destruction, maybe there's some issues to that, because if property destruction has a different function, maybe someone breaks objects when they're told to do work, but when they aggress for attention. If you put those two behaviors together, it's going to be very challenging to see when you have effects, when you have an intervention that is starting to work on attention requests. So if your intervention starts on training a person to appropriately ask for attention, you're going to first see a reduction in aggression, not property destruction. But if you have it aggregated, there could be changes in property destruction that overshadow changes that are happening in aggression. So it's important to organize your data by function. And what that means is, if your assessment tells you aggression is for attention, property destruction is for escaping work, those behaviors need to be tracked separately, because your interventions are going to have different levels of success for how you're training requests for breaks. And when you start working on requests for breaks, you should see a reduction in property destruction. So when you put your phase change line in to indicate I've started my intervention, you might want to put your phase change lines to even indicate the level of intervention for each function. So how much have I done for training breaks? How much have I done for requesting attention? So there's an art to the science. And like the language we use, even if we say something like disrespectful behavior, sure, you can define it, but it's very important that I'm not going to be going through operational definitions with you guys. It's important, if you're tracking something that doesn't have a good operational definition, which means two or more people can't agree when an occurrence has occurred, that means you've got to refine your definitions. And that data integrity is outside the scope of this presentation. So for data integrity purposes, IOA, which is inter-observer agreement, it means that you and I can come to an agreement on what is disrespectful. If someone thinks that an eye roll is disrespectful, I find that sometimes disrespectful if a student does that to me. And you'd be surprised what students do in classes. Then I need to include that. But if another person doesn't find that disrespectful and finds like swear words or cuss words or shouting out loud to be the definition, then we all need to come together and make sure that we're tracking the behavior appropriately. And remember, there are many dimensions we can track. There's frequency, there's duration, so how long an outburst lasts, there's latency, so on the incident of giving a direction, do some work, how quickly does the person engage in a target behavior, such as aggression, self-interest behavior, property disruption, etc. So those are 3 examples there, but there's also, recognize that choosing duration or frequency, it matters on what is the point of the behavior that is most relevant to social validity. And that means what causes the most harm to the individual. If I count just frequency for elopement, and I only have 1 elopement a day, that sounds great. But if that elopement was 1 and they went to Nevada from Ohio and I don't ever see them, they don't have an opportunity to elope again. That 1 is very significant. Duration and distance away from you, those could be the things you track for intensity. So what we choose to do with our data is just as important as how we present our data, because I could present that data like, oh, I'm the best behavior analyst in the world. 1 elopement today. Where is that student? Oh, I don't know. I'm not a good one. I'm not a good one. I've hidden something for you guys, which is, they took a bus, they left the school, they've been gone for 3 weeks, they come back. I only have 1 elopement in that 3 weeks, but perhaps I should be using distance away from me, an intensity measure such as duration, or like with distance, paired with distance could be that intensity measure to capture what is socially valid, what is of concern to the parents, what is of concern to the schools, what is of concern to you, and putting it all together, that's what makes evidence-based practice. There's also like permanent product. So a lot of school systems use answer sheets. So if someone completes an answer sheet, they record that as complete, but they didn't actually watch the behavior occur. There's also partial interval, momentary time sampling, and whole time sampling. And there's a really good paper by Linda LeBlanc and Aor, and they give the pros and cons of each tracking method. And what I'll do is I'll share that with you guys, probably in the chat bar as well as in an email, so that you guys can see that paper, because it's very useful, because it has a tree diagram that says, hey, can I observe it? No, then I need to refine how I define it. Can I observe it? Does it lend itself to time? Maybe duration. Does it lend itself to does it happen covertly? Is there a permanent product? Maybe I should use permanent product, right? So why we plot? It helps us engage in the scientific process during assessment. It lets us provide an outline of our results. It also lets us determine causal factors. A lot of people have the misnomer that single subject design is the same as a case study. That is incorrect. A single subject design is an experimental method. A case study is like when someone finds that something much later and then tries to review the case after everything's happened. So there's the example of Phineas Cage, the railroad guy who has a spike, that a railroad spike shoots through his head and it blathes part of his brain, and they record what part of his brain was destroyed and the behavioral changes afterwards. But it's not experimental. It's an after the fact kind of review. An experimental analysis is I'm tracking data as time goes on in a repeated measures fashion, which means I'm repeating my measurements, I'm putting an intervention in, and then I'm seeing the results. You can make causal directional allocations to that, and you can do that with confidence depending on your design. If it's an ABAB, which is a reversal design, if it goes up, if it's going up in A, it goes down in B, it goes up in A, it goes down in B, that's showing repeatability, just how gravity, as I drop the ball, it goes down. As I drop the ball, it goes down. If I can show that under these conditions, I'm demonstrating I can predict where it goes next, and I can control what direction it takes. That prediction, description, and control are the staples of an experimental method. So it allows us for interpretation of, are we doing something? Are we making a change? And that's very important in our work because it's the bread and butter of our practice. So one of the first plots that kind of shows the power of why we present data in visual analysis is Jon Snow in the cholera outbreak in England. So back in England, there was a big cholera epidemic, and they didn't know about disease. They didn't know that water could be contaminated. And so Jon Snow, forgive the name straight from Game of Thrones, he started to do the first basis of what is the modern day epidemiology. He started plotting epidemic cases and outbreaks. So the red circles indicate that there was an epidemic and an outbreak in that location. And he noted that they were around wells. And there was a area where a pub was not, so there's a pub is a place where in England people get drinks, alcohol. All the workers that were drinking from that pub, getting their water, were not getting sick. And so he realized that that pub was held underground in the basement. And he started saying that the water is basically what contained the cholera. That was the spread for the contagion. And even before having an understanding of disease, germ theory, this data allowed him to make the causal recognition that and he's not doing an experiment, he's not looking under the microscope, but he's making a scientific deduction based on the data he is looking at. And so that really just shows to you the power. You can discover things that a neuroscientist may be having trouble figuring out. And the part that challenges doctors nowadays is to work with behavior analysts, to work with behavioral data, to see if drugs that are delivered are actually having a change, are having an impact in the direction they would like. But if they're not taking data, we're really the ones that have to put forward cases for them. It's like, I really don't think the Risperdal is working the way it should. Can you look at this data? I've got a lot of examples of aggression right afterwards. Can you assist? And a lot of the center-based work I've had, we've had the privilege of being able to talk to psychiatrists, and some of them are hungry for data. They really are, and it's really great to provide them that because they engage in the scientific process with us. So why we plot allows us for ongoing clinical decision making. It improves the clarity of our recommendations, right? It improves what we say to people, and it allows us to change our data where we can make it more easy to analyze. So if I have data right on the x-axis blocking me from seeing, my session data or my date data or my tick points that help with visual analysis, there's a little lines that's supposed to kind of tell you there's a line going upwards and if it should align with like some of your data points. And then when should we put multiple series on a graph? When should I cut down the amount I'm presenting? Because sometimes less is more. When we present less, we can actually make more clear recommendations based on the data presentation. The truth is, there's an art to the science I mentioned. These are all ways to present the same data. I have and this is really kind of a more research-based example. People say, hey, table data is more accurate. Yes, it's more accurate, but I can't see from just looking at numbers immediately, what does this journal allocate its kind of keywords to? And so when I look at this, I'm like, oh, well, I can see the bar chart really quickly, what's first, what's so on. But then there's something called a word cloud that can actually quickly tell me the size, right? But I don't know the exact numbers. So really, it depends on your audience. If I'm making a presentation and I want to wow some people, then I might present something that looks really cool. I might break some rules. I might break some conventions. Like the 3D, there's a 3D convention. So if you have a bar chart, it's probably not a good idea to present a 3D bar because the extra dimension doesn't add anything to analysis. Because what Excel does is, say you've got the number 5, it'll present it like 4.99 and it'll go off into the distance. So here's a wow factor video. I'm not like I did, but the video is unavailable. You can watch on YouTube. Let's hear if I can grab it. But I did something on YouTube. It was a video presentation of the growth of the field, and if I can probably pull it up on. Let's see if I can find the link. I just have to go to my history, but it was a video presentation on the growth of the field. And what I was able to see was that there was growth all around the US in different states. Here, let me present this page. Can you see this? Can you see the YouTube video?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So this is geocoded data. This is all using Excel, and it's showing growth in the US from 94 to 2014. And I broke the convention of 3D bar charts because I ended up shifting the direction. Because if you look at the 3D bar chart from one direction, you only see it going off into the distance in one direction. So as long as I pan, I'm able to show perspective each time. So as long as I give a shift in perspective, I'm not going to basically, if I just stuck at Florida, it's going to make Florida seem bigger than the rest, right? And California eventually basically gets bigger at one point. So as long as I do the panning around, you can, but this was more of a wow factor. It's like, hey, I can make it a globe. I can that was just showing US data at the time. But so there's a lot of reasons to present data a certain way. And sometimes there's flair. So that really there is just to wow you and make you think I'm really cool. So just so you know, the function of me showing that was, hey, not just a British accent, not just a pretty face. Like, I can do some cool stuff, but it's not just about doing cool stuff. There's a reason. Maybe it's to motivate my stakeholders. Hey, look, we're growing, show an interest in what we can do, kind of deal, which I wish there were more people. I'm so glad you guys are here at this presentation, because I think there's a lot of hidden information in what we do. So why do people like group data? I don't know. I'll tell you some issues with it. I'll tell you some benefits. I'll start off with the benefits. I'm not going to be a Debbie Downer to all those randomized group control trials. Although, this is a side note, people love randomized group control trials, but it's convenience that they choose randomization. Technically, a matched group control, if I could have twin studies all day, it's very expensive. Then I want one twin in one group and one twin in the other group. That's probably way better, because for all the salient features, my group is going to be very homogeneous compared to my experimental group. And that's what you want. You don't want to say, hey, like, there's something existing in my two different groups that could account for the change. But anyway, it's so expensive to do that. That's why everyone says RCT, but not matched group control trials are the best. Your control actually gets the treatment. That's really important to me, because if you can only show...
Borrow your cell phone.
Oh, sorry, can you still hear me? So
we can hear you, Neil.
Okay, no worries. So here's aggregate data, right? What can I tell just by looking at these two bar charts? I can tell one is smaller than the other and one is bigger than the other. I can't tell by how much because I haven't actually labeled my y-axis. Shame on me. But let's present it in the actual data points. So in this case, there are 6 data points. Now I can see that the highest point didn't ever excel over the highest point, but overall, more people went up, which kind of gives a story now, but it doesn't tell me who went up and who went down. So one way to do this is to present individual data and understand the hidden distributions. In this case, you could say there's a bimodal potentially with one outlier, maybe. That could be a way to look at this distribution. So I'm going to call that the outlier. I'm going to call that bimodal. But it doesn't tell me who went up and who went down. So actually, there are 2 non-responders in my group. Well, that's not good news. That means that for the intervention that I put in place, 2 people did worse. Not by a whole lot, but they did worse. Let's call them non-responders. I have 2 people that had a large treatment effect. Well, this is another story. So what is salient for this intervention for them? Maybe it hit the function that mattered for them. Maybe it was really matched the biology if it's a medical intervention, and if it's a drug treatment, maybe they had the neurotransmitters for the intervention. Maybe it's a behavioral intervention and we chose the right type of interventions. Maybe it was intent to maintain behavior and my intervention taught acquisition skills for requesting attention appropriately, raising a hand, for example. And then there's a minor treatment effect. So maybe these people, so maybe some people were already learning that skill and already had some of those skills, and so there was only a marginal treatment effect, or maybe they haven't actually learned enough, right? Maybe they are just beginning the learning process that accounts for this minor treatment effect. But I don't know, because there's only 2 data points. Repeated measures are the key. I don't even know if there was an already ongoing trend. So when I talk about these large treatment effects or minor treatment effects, there could have already been a trend in that direction, which then weakens my argument. So the more observations you make, the more confidence you have in trajectory, trend, and level, and so on. So I asked you guys, hey, look, if that happened if those happen next, I'm going to have more confidence in my intervention. And if I see all those data points go up and up and up, again and again and again, I'm going to start having a lot of confidence, even in the group intervention, that something is going on here that is having the effects. If that's the direction we desire, an increase in skills. I haven't actually just defined what the behavior is. If this is aggression, oh dear, we've got a problem. So it's important to already track ongoing data paths to make sure that we have confidence in what we're doing. And this is one of the reasons that group designs, just to pre and post, to me, are insufficient. And individual level repeated measures provides increased confidence, even more so than some of the group designs. It doesn't matter how many times they slice it. They can give me stats up the wazoo. They can say they've got a confidence interval that's 95%, and I'll be like, what's your design? I need to see who your non-responders are. How about you present that data to me? I want to know who's who in your aggregate data, and it's not actually difficult to do that, but they don't really want to show you that. So say there was some data that said, hey, 50% of people in this on the call with us right now, so 50% of us are pregnant. I can't apply that information to me because I cannot be 50% pregnant. So it's very important that what happens with group level data, people start saying, hey, well, this is 50, that's the data. This is for everyone. But there's importance. This is the reason why we use individual subject designs, because there's individualization. There are factors that basically can conditionally be impossible, even when we have kind of stereotypic information being presented. I'm going to make some personal preferences that could be aesthetic.
Yeah, I'm from the call.
Oh, so if anyone's on the call, make sure you're muted. I should have you all muted, but make sure you're muted because we can hear some people. No, but it's probably an accident. All right, so I'm going to make some personal recommendations that could be just preferences that are aesthetic, but they could potentially be impacting to visual analysis. So this slide talks about the essential elements. And obviously you should have a labeled horizontal axis, the x-axis. Usually it's session or date data, some kind of time variable. We talk about repeated measures. Where in your treatment are you? Where is this intervention being placed? And where is the trajectory going? So make sure you label it. And this is important in case someone else takes over your case, so they can also start building the narrative that you were trying to work on. Make sure you have a labeled vertical axis. This is going to be the y-axis, right? Sometimes they call the ordinate an abscissa. We don't need to mess around with kind of those obtuse kind of research names, but y and x-axis you should know. You should know them as either horizontal axes or vertical axes. It's really not important knowing the name. It's just important labeling and doing the practice. If you have a phase change line, it's important to put it in to discriminate between your baseline and your intervention. And when I mention ABAB as a reversal, just calling your baseline A is insufficient. It's not detailed enough. Let people know that there's a baseline. Put it in. Let people know what your intervention is. If you're using self-monitoring, or if you're using, a diary, or you're using some kind of self-management technique, put that in the label so people can actually see from your graph without having to go into your behavior plan and read all the things there. Quick, this is for you. This is a story for you, but this is also a story for others so that they can quickly access what you're doing. Because sometimes we can do great work. We can get kids to speak, request things for the first time. Let's let that story be told so other people can see it too, so people know the power of applied behavior analysis. So phase labels, I mentioned, make sure you've got a line in between your labels. Usually they break the data point. So note that the data path, which is the direction that the data path is going, is actually broken between separate phase lines. And that's so that you visually look at them as different, right? Here are your data points. A data path is a trajectory that's ongoing. And we should title our graphs like, who is this graph for? Is this for Jimmy? Is this for, Jonathan? Is this for Samantha? In research, you'll see a figure caption, which will say, this is a study I did for chess training, which is silly, but whatever. But total number of moves made against a chess engine. Okay, so that's what's being depicted here. But in your graphs, it might be name of the person and then the location, right? So, this is the school setting. And then I want to see that same behavior for aggression or whatever in the home setting. So sometimes they put it down close to the x-axis in the right bottom corner, just to show the location and the participant, who is the client, who is receiving these services. So quality graph features, people talk about a 2-to-3 ratio, and they talk about this ratio because if you make your y-axis and you elongate it really, really tall, you can make it seem like you're making a bigger change, even though the data hasn't changed. So Excel actually does this very easily for you by using the chart function, which is when you go to the tab at the bottom and you do insert tab, you can do insert chart, and then you can paste in your graph. It will actually get you that ratio without you having to mess and adjust the size each time. And one of the ways we can kind of be deceptive is to change the min value. Say I have a percentage of acquisition skills. Instead of going 0 to 100, I could make it 0 to 40. And I could say, hey, look at that big change. But when you put it in perspective that our goal is to get to 100, it starts looking smaller if I put it 0 to 100. So you should be consistent in how you present some graphs. For example, percentage graphs, you probably should be doing 0 to 100. And if you want to make comparisons between people in a classroom or a group intervention that you're working on in like a group contingency, then you want to present the same axes together so that you can kind of look at like, hey, look at this guy 0 to 25, look at this guy 0 to 25. And then you can make more easy kind of visual analysis across the two, rather than one being 0 to 25, the other one 0 to 12, because you kind of have to do that half thing in your head, which is a bit more challenging. So Kabina, Kostowitz, Brennan, and King, these are all the same data, but like the graph in the bottom left appears to be way more like, I think that looks better, right? It looks like there's a bigger shift, but it's all the same data. And so their recommendation of the 2-to-3 ratio stems from the fact that we have one way to present on many of the graphs, so that way we all are kind of consistent. And that way when we're looking at our data, we don't get wowed by an accidental like shift in the graph. And Excel will do something goofy. Say you have a graph in the spreadsheet, so the one with all the cells, and you would insert a row, it will actually make the graph longer because it will insert the row and expand that graph out on the y-axis as well. So that's another reason why I prefer to use the chart tab and keep the data separate from where my graphs are, because if I mess around with the data, sometimes I can accidentally mess around with my graph and change features I did not want to change. Oh, something that so this is Tufty. He mentioned the term lie factor, and it's the effect size that's shown in comparison to the effect size measured in the graph. So if I make the graph larger, I can make it seem like I had a bigger effect than I did than a graph that's been has the 2:3 ratio. And Kavina and Aor recommend acceleration charting, which is a logarithmic scale. I'm not a big fan of that, but a logarithmic scale means that the y-axis never changes because it can capture something that happens 10,000 times a day or 10,000 times a minute to 1 time a day, because it's every move up is 10 times the previous one. So that's what a logarithmic base 10 would do. So if it moves up 1, it's 10 times more. The next one is 100 times more. The next one's 1,000 times more. So you can see if they never have to change their y-axis with their graph, then their graph is actually able to be compared across every single graph for every single person every time, which is perfect for what are meta-analyses, which is comparing studies between studies. In single subject designs, you have to do some kind of adjustments when you use just like fixed number graphs. So let's go to Excel. So I'm going to pop up Excel and we're just going to mess around. It's going to be very basic. I'm going to show you some of the quirks of creating a line chart, creating a scatter chart, and then like kind of why I recommend using a scatter chart versus a line chart. And these are, again, personal recommendations. So let's pop this up. I'm going to put my numbers. Now, here's something. I'm not even going to label my y-axes and my x-axes. So, okay, I am going to label them because I just said I wasn't going to, and I just wanted to be lazy. Let's avoid that. Let's avoid that lazy monster. Okay, let's call it sessions. I said I wasn't going to do it, and then I've already. I'm going to do something lazy though. Behavior target, nondescript label. So I recommend not doing something like that. So, all right. The good thing about Excel is that it can actually predict some of the small things, like they can predict patterns. So in you, I was just doing 1, 2. If I did 2, 4, it would predict it too. So just it predicts patterns, which is nice. Anyway, so to do that, I put 1, 2. I'll zoom in so it's easier to see. 1, 2. It's going to predict. I can double click here, or I can drag it down. So if I click that little square, it can then change it to 1 to 10. I'm going to put some random data in. It's none of it's meaningful. I'm just putting numbers in. All right, so you guys have already kind of done how to create a graph, but first thing you do is you select the data. So in this case, Excel is going to predict what's on my left is going to go on the x-axis. What's on my right is going to be kind of my independent. That's going to be my that's my dependent variable, and that's going to be on the y-axis. So your dependent variable is obviously the behavior you're tracking. Your independent variable is your intervention. So I go to insert, which is going to be this tab right here, and it's got recommended charts. I don't listen to Excel because sometimes it tells me dumb things. So the first one I'm going to do is line. I don't recommend this. One, like I've just clicked this one. It's giving me the session data. That's the behavioral. Oh, it's percentage. Let's change that out. That's rubbish. I don't even want that. Let's do chart, and let's do line with straight markers. You can hover over it. Line with markers. Does it say straight markers? I prefer straight. We'll do this one. Okay. No, it's presented the session data in here. And I'm not a fan of that. We don't need that data. We wanted it right there. So I want to now show you why I don't like Excel for line charts and I prefer scatter charts. So say I would have changed this to 4.5, right? It did change that, but it didn't move this across over here. So I want this to go over here in 4.5, but Excel won't do that for session data. It also, if I were to delete this, it doesn't do anything to this. It doesn't try to move us anywhere. which is problematic, I find. And then the other issue that I don't like is that we have here like the session data presented. So it's another step to have to delete that. So if I take this now to a line chart, so I'll take this and instead go to a scatter chart with straight line markers. So this is without markers. This is the scatter with straight line and markers. So this is already presenting a better depiction of what I wanted. Now, say I did the 4.5 thing again, right? Watch it shift. That's very important. Say I wanted 4.5 for whatever reason. It's much more accurate. It's presenting exactly a coordinate. It's saying, if you put it at 4 and 1, I'm going to move it there. If you want it to be 3.25, it'll put it there. So this is a much more accurate system, which is preferential, right? Now, say there's a reason to do it, right? Say I'll do the insert line I mentioned before. It'll actually make this graph bigger. See that? That was the thing I said I didn't like, which is the reason why I do over here, I do insert, here we go. I have to do insert and I choose chart. And then say I take that, say I take this over and put this in the chart, right? It won't accidentally, here, I'll do this at a popped out view. If I do insert here, it just expanded that chart out. The reason why I like to separate my chart from my spreadsheet is because this is now consistent. It's left over here and it's not going to be interfered with while I like accidentally do things, right? So just a side note. Okay. So the coordinate axes here, say I move this just to be, say I wanted to make a phase change, I wanted to create my beginning of a phase change line. Right now, I've got a break in the data, which is really nice. So this actually happens when you go to select data. See this button that says hidden empty cells? It's actually an option. It tells me, what do you want to show empty cells as? I want them to be gaps in my data. Well, that's useful because then I only, if I did put a phase change line here, and I recommend against drawing, and I'll tell you why. Say I did this phase change line like this. Now if I move, so Excel's being good. Back in the day, if you moved it, it wouldn't move with the chart object. So back in the day, that used to move around. Now I'll show you a way that it would move around. Because I drew it in Excel, Excel's very smart at saying, hey, I predict you to be part of this object. Because I drew it here, and now I'm adding it, guess what's going to happen? Doesn't believe me, doesn't want to play with me. So that's the reason why also I don't like drawn-in features. I'm pretty much against the drawn-in features because of those issues. We call it jostling. If you move your graph, now for some reason you've got inaccurate data, completely accidental. But you can actually plot 3.5 perfectly, and you can then, I could put a, let's say if I made a new, say I wanted to add a new series. Let's put a new series. Actually, I'll just do this, right? Instead of making a whole, adding it, I can just select it all, and I can go to insert chart, then I can go to scatter, right? And it's already started to put the one in there for me. And so I could put, say my max value is 60, which it is. I put that to 60. Then I could fix this axis over here, which is always nice. Fix it up. I do like the feature that it kind of predicts what I need, but in this case, I'm trying to make a phase change line all the way down. So over here in design, there's a add chart element, and there's error bars, and you can do more error bar options and do a fixed value. I can set it to 60. I can make no cap and make it go down, just down, while deleting the parts I don't want, and then turning this bad boy into no line, no marker. Now, actually, what's cool about this is, say I have multiple interventions, I could put this, say So that's a new phase change line. Very quickly, you've got the point where we've started to get phase change lines. But let's go back. Say we've got a beautiful graph, right? And we just want to add a row. Let's just say we didn't do this. Okay, so right now, I've got a beautiful graph. I've adjusted it. I've labeled all the axes. I've cleaned it up, which we will do. We'll do all this stuff. We'll, one of the annoying things as well is it makes it gray. I hate that. It's so annoying because it's not as clear. Gray is just hard to see when you print it out. The line is not a solid line, so it's not as clean as changing it all to black. And then there's no tick marks, which is annoying always. So you have to go to this little button over here that shows axes options, go to tick marks. Usually measure outside. You don't want it on the inside because you do that on the inside, they start touching. And that's, if you've got something that's already obscuring it, you want to avoid plotting on the inside usually. It's kind of a, all right, wants me to, yeah. Okay, so in this example, my 0 value is about to be touching that. We'll go over raising a 0. It's a little bit of a pain, but if you like it, it's not very difficult to do. Same thing with tick marks. We like to add our tick marks over here. So I'm going to add them on the outside. Okay, now say I wanted to add the phase change line. You can do add. You check the series name, make it phase. The X values, so those are going to be this. Those are going to be the session data. So that's going to be right there. And the Y values are going to be all of these. And that's how I add it if I cleaned up the graph. And the only reason why that makes sense is if I did this and I did insert and I did the scatter. You see, I've already cleaned up this graph. Why would I go back and do this? Because then I have to do all the cleaning up I did. I may have not labeled it, but that's the reason why I did the insert this way versus if I knew at the beginning this was going to be there, then this was the better way. Do insert, choose the graph, then clean it up. But if I started doing some cleaning, some housekeeping, perhaps I want to change it and adjust it there. Now let's do some very quick cleaning items. Axis titles, annoying, it's already done this. I have to adjust it to get the title. And note that the title is also grayscale. Sometimes you can click the whole graph and then click that, which I've just made the text all black instead of grayscale, which I think is easy to see. So let's call it aggression. And I'm a big fan of aggression. Here we go. Yeah, aggression. Session data. So I think you can even link cells, which is always useful. So see that now? What's nice about that, all I did there was I did an equal sign in the formula bar and I linked it to this. Now, if I change this to date, right, that will change automatically. That's a neat, it's neat because now I'm going to show you date. Now, what's weird, let's go back to the scatter. I'll throw this down here. Boop. We'll go back to it. Bloop. Oh, you have to really throw it properly. All right. So I bring this and I do insert the line chart. Another reason why I hate the line chart. Let's go to it. Let's figure it out. All right, watch this. Delete this bad boy. One housekeeping item done. Now, if I change this to, so that's date data, right? It's going to predict it. It hasn't changed. It's very annoying. So that's problematic. It's another reason why I don't like it. It's not. Now, I believe if I were to reselect it and do insert, then the line would automatically adjust, which is goofy. Stupid Excel. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. But look down here, this can be goofy too, because if I do this and I do format cells, I'm going to show you what Excel shows the numbers as. It uses a actual number system and they're actually numbers, which can be useful if you want to do formulas for adding days, predicting weekends, all that stuff. But anyway, just as you show, look, in that I formatted it, it immediately changed my session date to date data and 2021. maybe that. You see how it's automatically adjusted? I can do the same thing for aggression. And just putting the equal size here, putting here, that means if you make a template that has these small features where you have cells that adjust, preferably from your chart object, you know, like I'll put that phase there. See, it has a phase change there. And now I can change that to whatever. And in my chart object, the same process would happen. So that's playing around with Excel. That's my recommendation for chart objects. What's neat about Excel, and I think this is particularly relevant to the features of drug delivery, to intervention delivery, to changes in staff, date data can also include times, whereas session data cannot. So say my intervention actually occurred. So I'm going to throw this down there, and I'll double down that. I want to show that this. So what I've done here is I've made my phase change 1-3 and 1-3. So now it's actually overlapping with this, which is actually a problem. So let's go back to adding an error bar. I'll just plug it in. Let's do it. More options. The annoying thing is it's done horizontal, so I have to fix this by going to vertical. I have to find vertical error bars, which would be Y error bars down here. Now I've got that. I can do no-cap fixed value, plug in 60, and let's do it. I'll do it just minus, just to be clean. Delete that formula data point. Let's make it go away. So I'm making no data point, no line, and then I'm going to fix this axis right here. And I'm going to make it 60 max. So once it's fixed, right, once you put it fixed, you have to press reset over here to make it auto again. So even if I fix this and I have a value, like say, for example, here goes to 89, it's off the page, right, which can be problematic. So it can be useful to have this at the resetting value. And then, but then you would have to adjust your error bar, and I have to make it longer to account for the size. So I'll make it 100, or you could do this tricky thing, 100%, which then whatever your y-axis, it's just going to do 100. I think that's actually better because you never know what 100% is going to be, and if you have to keep typing in what your maximum value is, right? So say my max value now is going to be 200, right? Let's make it 99. Right, it's already on there. Let's make it 101 or 210. That's good, fine. Then I reset this. I have to adjust this, and it should be at 100, right? But if I make my y-axis, if I change it to be 250, shouldn't it do it? Doesn't want to do it. Let's see. Let's do 210. Let's do 220. All right, it doesn't want to do it. Why is that? Let's have a look. Do I have to double click here? Let's see. Let's do 220 then. Oh, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. See, this is the pause that tries to bug you. Could I do both? No, just one. Minus, no cap. Perfect. Let's go.
I've got a question for you, Neil.
Yeah, go, shoot.
So this trick that you're showing with these automating phase lines that move along with the data, is that feature only available doing the scatter, or can you do it with the 2D line with markers as well?
You can do it on both. You can do it on both.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've got an issue right here, which is number one, it's on 1-3. So we don't want it there. So say I put that intervention, or I just want it in the middle, I can actually put a time, 12 p.m. What's nice about that, it just shifts it right to the middle point, which is the midday between 1-3 and 1-4. Now it's very useful. Say I want to scan over this graph and I want to know when the intervention was delivered. If I hover over it, it'll tell me like the date that it has, which is kind of neat. And you can click on that and it will tell you the time. Now let's have a look. We've got a fixed value. We need to change this. Now the issue is I didn't change my max value. So that's the issue. That's why the percentage didn't work. So go back to percentage. Let's put 100. Okay. Now I don't have to mess around with that. I just have to mess around with this. Boom. That's what I remembered. I was like, oh, why isn't it working? Forgot a step. So the good thing about using percentage for the error bar is that it's going to be whatever 100% of this is, which is useful if you have a change in your data. Now, in this case, I'm not doing a good job as a behavior analyst. I've also got some weird things going on with my minimum value. So I would probably choose my major value, rather than be 50, I'll probably put it to 20. I'll make my minimum be, I might raise it. So I'll do minus 20 just for fun. And I'll make my cross value minus 10. Now I've got my, and then I've got a trick that is a little neat. You guys don't have to memorize how to do this. There's articles on how to do this. This is kind of minutia stuff, but you can basically get rid of that value using a custom code. So in this case, I could say anything below 0, I don't want. So it's just like math stuff. Like I don't want it to be 0. Oh, I got rid of the wrong axes. Haha. Let's undo that. And now I've really messed it up. There we go. Wrong axes. So be careful what axes you click. So in this case, I'm saying I don't want to see any value that's below 0, and I've happened to raise my value, and I messed up my error bar because instead of being the length of 220, it's now 230 because I made it bottom value be minus 10, even though it's not showing there. So I've got to go in here and change this to, well, let's say 230 then. Let's try that, see if that works. No, let's make that 210. Yeah, maybe that'll work it. Oh, no. All right, we're gonna have to change this up, make it more customized. So in this case, the percentage won't work well. So I'm gonna change it to fixed value, and I'm gonna change it to 230. And that gets it right down to the line, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so what I want to do here is get rid of it. And one way you can do it is get a whiteout box, and you've got another point to jostle, or you can use this custom code. It's the square parentheses equals, actually I'm going to do anything less than 0. Sometimes I mess this up, so you have to bear with me. So now I've said anything less than 0 should become, I did the wrong one. You've got to get the right, you've got to write alligator. There we go. Less than 0. Add that. Beautiful. No, did I do the right way? Where'd you go? Oh no, here. Parentheses are messed up. Boop. There we go. So there we go. Make sure you got your alligators the right way. This is it's very basic maths, but like when you're presenting, you're just like throwing in stuff. So what I did there was raise the 0 because this data point was so close. The 1 is so close to the 0. It makes it aesthetically pleasing. And I also would adjust this so that it can be, you can adjust it to have 2 phase lines. You know, one that's dotted, and you just basically have phase 1 here, and then phase 2 here, and you would add this. And sometimes people look at the dotted line as a minor phase change, and the straight line as a major phase change. So that's a Cooper and Heron, the White Book recommendation. And it's not too bad. I mean, you can also change the color of these. So you could say, hey, look, this is an intervention. You can make the red lines medication. You can make them red. You can make them medication changes so that you can visually see that. So you can change the color. I'll say these are medication ones. I could do that. I could make phase line med phase, right? If I could spell. All right. So then I'm going to add another one. So select data and add a new phase, phase 2. I'm going to change my X values over here, and I'm going to put these guys over here. Nothing's been filled in yet, so nothing's going to show up. And then I'm going to put, this is going to be my major phase change line. I have to do the same thing that I did before, which is create an error bar. I'll do more options. And this one, in case it's doing, oh, I can do minus, no cap. I'll do fixed 230 because I have the raised value. Okay, delete that. Now I have to adjust this. And in this case, I can just take this data. I'm going to control exit, paste it down here, make sure that Excel has actually got it. Yep, still got it. I've still got it too, which is nice. And then I can put I'm going to say that this intervention went in place at 9 p.m. Now, I like this because someone could go into a data and really like look at it. Say I had session data accompanying in a separate sheet, say in sheet 1. So all these, okay, sorry. Say in sheet 1, I had session data. And then, 3 bar, 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 right? And then this was actually an average. So I could make this. Where are my brackets at? There we go. Right? I could average the session data. Say if it's 12 sessions, I don't know. Now I can link this sheet. Say there was an issue, right? And you just needed to keep doing that, like average, blah, blah, blah. And you had an issue with this day. Then you could go in and you say, hey, look what happened in session 7. Who was working on shift 7 or session 7? And you find out it was a new staff member. And then you can be like, hey, look, we need to address this. But anyway, here are some ideas. There's no title. I haven't got a name for the chart. This is kind of blue. People prefer. There's still a dot here that I can get rid of. But I hope you can see that, like, if you spend some time, this could be relatively easy to make all your graphs very clean. Hit preferences you like. So one preference I used to like and do like for kind of detecting small shifts is I like to make it transparent on the inside of the data point. So when I go to fill, I'll go to solid fill, but then I'll change the transparency to usually about 50, 30, somewhere in that range. And maybe grayscale, I'll do a lot light gray. And then I do want a border. I do think the border helps. So say I was looking at these guys. It might not be possible to see without that transparency that there was actually a slight decrease here. And I can kind of see, I can probably make it even clearer by, let's bolster the line a bit. And then let's make the transparency even more. So the paint marker is going to help you adjust the color issues in the fill. So I need to go to marker. I need to go solid fill, and maybe I'll change it to this and then actually increase. See if that looks cleaner. So right here, I can see, hey, look, there was a massive increase, but anyone could see that. But seeing the decrease and then the increase might be a little bit tougher to see. Now, I'll go back and we'll look at it. I think it's easy to see in that is like, but if I change it back to, and then I go back to like no transparency, I think it's a little harder. Maybe it's not, I don't know. If I like to see the inside part because it lets you like kind of have another window to looking at the trend. So that's a bit of playing with Excel. Did you guys, let's see, sorry, let me get this. Here we go. So do you have any questions about that? Just quick playing around. We're going to have a lot more videos to go through. Do you guys have any questions about like messing around with Excel? Any quirks you guys have like found to be troublesome? And if not, I'll just keep going.
I've got a question for you.
Shoot.
We had a question when I did the intro training. There was about 60, 70 people that were a part of that last Thursday. And one of the questions was related to what you just talked about, essentially like how do you automate the phase line so that you don't have to shift them around every time that you're, elongating the x-axis, putting in more data, that type of thing. How do you make it move with? So I think you spoke to that. You went through it pretty quickly, probably for most. So 2 questions. One, are you able to go back and just show how to do that a little bit more slowly. And then the second part is, I want to make sure I got this right, is that the article that you put in behavior analysis and practice on automating phase change lines and their labels, is that the one that speaks to it kind of in depth?
Yes, that one is that. And on Thursday in particular, we'll be going over the template I created that I'm hoping to train everyone on and how to use that. So like I'm kind of, you're right. It's like it's buzzing through it. It's and like I kind of think of it as like second nature. Like this is just like, hey, you do it like this, pop this in, blah blah blah. But like it's been a pain in the butt to figure out. Like so, my experience was back in the day. I was like, I think in 2007, 2008, I was doing data entry for a facility for Prader-Willi syndrome. And they had massive SIB, and the behavior analysts hated Excel. Like they were like, I don't like this. Can you graph this for me? Can you do it like this? And they had all these things that they wanted to kind of mess around with. So I kept on updating my template, and it saved me time. And they're like, how long did this take you? This must have taken you like 2 weeks to do. And I'm like, yes, it took me 2 weeks, maybe a little bit inappropriate, like, yeah, it took me a long time. But I did take me a long time at first to build the template, but then it became so much easier. So I'll just run through the template here in this session. So that kind of a prelim.
Okay.
I'm gonna do it very quickly because I'm going to go over it in much more depth. I have instructions in the template that how to say step one, save your own. So I have it first, save it as your new file so that you keep your original and you can access it. And as you find things, I encourage you guys to email me your issues because I would love to update this with real people's problems. When you stay in university and you get removed from treatment, like I've worked in intensive treatment centers and like it's been a while since I got punched and like it's been a while. Like I remember the times, right? So I hope that I'm on the pulse of what people's concerns are, but I think that the more time I am away from people, I'm actually teaching online now, the more I won't know what are real issues. But one of the first issues I said was like, hey, look, rather than type in the days every day, let's just change one cell or a couple cells. So say it's January 2016, shows how long this one has been since I messed with it. I'll just change my dates, all of them, to that from one cell. So that's just using that kind of equal feature. So up here, it says in title update, find it, match the month, match the day, match the year, make it true. And so if I want to change it to February, my birth month, it changes it. And that changes it for all the graphs, which is very useful. So I don't have to go back and forth if I'm adjusting dates. If I want to just see a period, a specific period, we'll make it small for ourselves. We'll make it February. We'll do 3 months. So February, March, April. That's 3. The good news, I can press this button. Now, I'm sorry, Apple users. Apple does not like macros, which are program features. So this has a little Visual Basic. So that button might not work for the Mac users. And I apologize, but that's Macintosh problem. That's Neil behavior. So again, this is the client name. And I talked about changing the client's name. So it changes automatically in your graph without you having to go in. Or do Nathan Neil will combine us. Right. So we know that changes. That's very useful. And the date is wrong. So something went wrong. Oh yeah, here's what's wrong. I need to make this 2021. So that actually for the end of the year, in case it goes to 2022, so it went wrapped round, you need to put in the start year and end year for the button to work. It takes a second because it's angry at me for messing it up. But 2021 to my 3 months, and it will move that phase change line with the graph data. So say I just want February to March, just want 2 months. Again, we've kept the phase change line move with it. Now, the good thing about this is you can actually just type in the label you want. So in this case, it's physical, let's do Risperdal. I'm all about aggression. Risperdal, let's do 10 milligrams. And let's do this as aggression. Okay, all about aggression. So here's now my phase change line is changed with the label, and the phase line is inserted. And the good thing is I can actually, in between these cells, I didn't talk to you about a feature called number NA. When Excel finds something it can't solve, so it's trying to solve a math problem, what is 0 divided by 0? That's a math problem people are trying to figure out right now. They find these error variables come up. So I actually found a way to make it work for my advantage, which is I use the number n-a, and it allows me to connect data points to each other when there aren't data between the days. So say 3, and so this is all the data right here. Okay. So if I wanted to break this, say I would consider this an outlier, in between these cells, if you can see up in this cell up here, it has number NA. I actually hide it. You can't see it. So it's actually, let me see if I can make it so you see it. There it is. It's hidden. See it? See if I can hide it again. I made it so no one can see how I do my things, but not for secrecy because it makes it look really gross when you see them. Anyway, they're there. If you press delete in this cell, so right now it's connecting it. If you delete that cell, it will break it. And then if you put your phase change line in, say first intervention, first attention training. Okay. Plugs in with it lined up. Now, good thing is all together, even the labels, because these labels are actually attached to the lines. So this is kind of a sneak peek what we're going to go on Thursday, how to use it a bit more depth. You have those templates in the Dropbox link. And remember, this session will be recorded, which is going to help kind of look at how we create some graphs. But for the most part, it's going to be, you're creating separate series. So these are data points. So remember how there's a data point up here? I got rid of it, but it's a data point which is removed, and it doesn't chart next to each other because it doesn't chart lines. Like, so say there's a data point next to it, it wouldn't put a line between the two. So say I put that there, right? Before I made that adjustment for the data point, which was say right here, if I don't have no line, then it will start charting between them. And we didn't want that. So that's why I did that change. I also made them invisible. When you're editing and creating your own template, you kind of want to see that data point because it's actually really difficult to find. You've got to be kind of like, where are you? And especially if it's off the graph, say this went off the graph, then it's even more difficult. So say I'm trying to get that data point, trying to adjust this, it becomes more challenging. So sometimes until I'm completely satisfied with my template, do I remove the marker. I actually keep it in until I'm ready to kind of clean up house. And so this is an example of using the error bar as your phase change line. And there are other ways to do the phase change line. Dubquay uses a combo bar chart with a scatter line, and then he makes it invisible for part of the bar chart. And the reason he did that was so that it automatically plotted in between like 2 days, like 1-3 and 1-4. So mine requires a bit more like of annoying process in that you have to put a 12 p.m. to make it midday. But in my template, I found a way, because that was one of my critiques, or someone would critique me and say, hey, this is your thing is rubbish, which people do in the field just to demotivate you and hurt your ego and your spirit. Over here in this one, I ended up putting all the same days with the 12 p.m. already pre-marked. So when my phase change lines are created, they're already in the point of mid between the day. And so that's what that baseline tab has. It's the way to plot immediately midday without you having to plug in the 12 p.m. Now, if you want to adjust the exact time, you would be really on point. You can then just go ahead, like, this is 12 p.m. Oh, well, that's good. You actually might have to type it all in, because I made a formula to do it so that I didn't have to keep, typing it in. So you just type in 10, 02, 20, 20, so 16 in this case, and then maybe you want to do it 3, and it does a very weird thing where you actually include the seconds. That's how precise scatter charts are. They're meant for time series. Now, when I look at this data, and I guess this has to be moved over here, when you look at the data, major will now be found a problem with your thing. Oh, because don't do what I just did, which is copy and paste. Okay, so it didn't like what I did because it was like searching for it. So just delete it, type in major. No problem with that. It won't be angry with you for doing that. So there's a kind of glitch right there. Didn't want to pull from this because it was aligned to this, and it didn't agree with me for shifting its new location. Another thing, and this is, I haven't gone over this, but it's actually quite neat. The scatter chart will figure out if you have jumbled data. And what I mean by this, say you have a terrible behavior tech and they are out there, we all have moments of laziness. Or maybe you have 2 people entering data and they just enter it in different jumbles. The cheeky techs, all right, date, right? Say one does it, or they did their date data like this. They're like, alrighty, I track data. I was over at the house here, and and then another one comes in right after, enters in the spreadsheet. But I was actually over. I was over at the house last year, but I forgot to put my data in because I'm a terrible person, right? It's like let's just say they start like messing with it, right? All right, let's put some dates that are actually out of order. Let's put that 3. And this is a very neat feature because in this way, I'm going to highlight the ones that are out of order for ease of us looking at them. I could just do conditional formatting to show that, but let's do this. Say some people have entered their data and it's all out of order. It's all out of whack. Well, now we put the data in. Another reason why scatter chart, amazing. I'll do the line. Let's just say behavior. Let's do that. New word, behavior. This is a really interesting behavior. Okay, so the line chart has actually moved it around, hasn't it? Let's have a look. See what that one is. 1, 4. Oh, it's done it. That's good. Was it 1, 3? 1, 3 is 1. 1, 4. But where's 2, 9? So it got 3, 2. Let's have a look. Sometimes it doesn't do it. Okay, 3, 3. Oh, it has done it. Oh, that's good. I wasn't expecting it to do it. Sometimes it doesn't do that though. Scatter chart will be very good at like reorganizing the data as well. And you can actually reorganize that data. In this case, it doesn't want it. It doesn't like it. Oh, maybe this is a critique of scatter then. Your critique of scatter doesn't like you doing this. So in this case, you should order your data. One way to do that very quickly is to select your data, go to data and go to filter, then do it by oldest to newest. And then I would copy. I might even put it in another tab just to be safe. And then I'll put that in scatter. But yeah, it looked like the scatter didn't like that. Scatter with straight line. Oh no, this is so the annoying. So one annoying thing about scatter with straight line, it does do this gap, right? Which can be very annoying. When we're looking at this and we're looking at, and we get the straight line marker. So this is a straight line marker. We'll compare the 2 graphs quickly. Let's do it. Let's just do it here. And then let's reorganize this to insert scatter. Oh, that's goofy right now. But yeah, the annoying thing is both of them you have to do some adjustments to bring the weighted area where no data is being tracked. And like the templates really help that, because one of the things is Excel, even if you do automated features, you have to kind of go in and manually adjust every axis to stay your starting point. And what's annoying is there's no, let's see if that goes in. There we go. Put that in. Oh, yeah, so this is a bit odd, isn't it? So the scatter is trying to like link them all together out in the order you presented it. So that will be annoying for the scatter type chart. So you do have to reorganize your data. And I don't think that's a terrible issue, but yes, I recommend using the filter function, and that will allow you to reorganize it and then see if that improves the scatter function, which has many other advantages. And the good news is it presents the gaps to be accurate in terms of how much time has passed. So this gap here between here and here there's less of a gap between the days, and this presents a larger gap to show that there have more days passed between two observations, which is very neat for a scatter type chart. But yeah, let's continue with the presentation. So we've gone over a little bit of how quirky Excel is, and I forget because I haven't been making as many graphs as I used to. But what we want to show is that narrative. We want to show that there's a change in trend. We want to talk about in terms of increasing, decreasing, or no trend. We want to talk about it in terms of level, which is how big of a change there is. And remember, there's always going to be a cap on some performances. So if you have 100%, you're not really going to get over 100% unless you're offering extra credit in my classes, right? But there might be a ceiling effect, which means if someone's already at 90 and then they go to 100, it might not seem like a massive change, but that's the max achievement that someone can perform. We call that ceiling performance. There's always a floor level performance, which is the lowest something can go to. So when we talk about level, we want to talk about it in terms of those, the floor or the ceiling of our performance. And sometimes another thing, which I didn't present, which is how to set goals or present goals. We can actually have goals in the graph, and maybe I'll do this for my my template. I'll actually put a goal graph in, which is just using the horizontal bar. So say the goal is to get aggression to 2 a day. You know, maybe it's like verbal aggression, you know, swearing. Let's put swearing in there. So like the acceptable, I swear a bit, so let's put that in, right? So in this case, one thing you can do, and you know what I'm going to do? Don't download those templates. I will adjust them, and I'll add this feature because I just thought about it, because people want to see goals in their graph. Is that too much to ask for? I don't think that is. Anyway, I should just link it. You know, I'm going to adjust the template. So I mean, you can download them, it's fine, but I'm going to make it even better tomorrow. So what's happened? Oh, my graph's gone. What's happened? What's happened? Cancel it. All right. It's angry at me. Excel, don't do this. It embarrasses me. All right, X values. Did I get the wrong values? So X values seem right there. Okay. Y values seem good here. All right, that's good. All right. So what I can do is I can do the opposite of what I did last time for the error bars. I can present a horizontal error bar, and I can set this as the goal. So I can say, hey, look, we're actually moving towards this goal, which is going to be, and this is giving me vertical, I want to move to X error bars, and I want to make it, let's do 100%. In this case, get 100. And it doesn't want to do that. So then I have to fix my y-axis. Let's go ahead and fix it. And this annoying thing is it's not fixed to numbers. I'm going to do some sneaky cheeky things. So just ignore that I'm doing this. Okay, let's have a look. Numbers. All right. So we want it to be, let's do this to this. Let's do this max. Let's do this. Format error bars. Let's do, that's 100%. So let's do this. See if it works. I don't even know if it will. Let's make this back to dates. Okay. All right. I've got it. But don't do what I did. That's just me trying to like do it quickly. That's just trying to cheat it. So now I've got this line that tells me like, hey, look, how many times have I achieved, this, let's get rid of that marker. Okay, so now I've got this line that tells me like, when am I getting to this goal? And I can do the same kind of editing to colors that I have in the other one. So I can change it to yellow. And like, I don't mind if you were to send this to a publication, they don't want colors. But like, I think that for the sake of, like if every time your goal line is green or your goal line is red or your medication phase changes are red, make it consistent so that when you're analyzing it, you know what you're looking at. So you just be consistent in terms of standardizing how you're doing it. So there's an example of using the phase change line as a goal. And what I'm going to do is for all the templates I just showed you, I'll just go ahead and make that a new feature because I think that's useful. And if you guys agree, I'll go ahead and do that so that it's got that in there. But you should be able to see level, which is the improvements of like how high it is, how moderate it is, how low it is, and variability, which usually is the bounce in the data path. Here's an example: accelerating trend, the first line; decelerating trend, the second line, and then level. And then level is a big jump up effect. It usually can be a MO, like so the person could do it but never did it. Variability is that bounce in the data. How much is it moving around? And I like to put envelopes around variability because you can say in the first example of this, there's an expansion of variability. And in the second one, there is a funneling. And if variability is a matter for health and concern, so too would you want to demonstrate that picture. So you might include trend lines like these to depict that narrative. I may not have decreased it completely, but I have decreased its variability and it is becoming more consistent. And so I'm working now on getting that decreasing trend. So those are visual aids to the path. So you want to give the reader a story. One way is to use trend lines, and those are visual aids. So two ways can be superimpose a mean level, which is kind of the level that it's at, and then also project the trend. Where is it going? So what's its height, and then where is it going? This is called the dual criterion method, and people have written on this like Fisher or how to reduce false positives. So thinking that there's an effect when there isn't. So looks good, but there was an ongoing trend. So I actually don't think this is great data because if the intervention were not in place, you would predict that dotted line. So then the effect changes just that little bump from 10 to 8, basically, a 2.2 word increase. Maybe that's significant, I don't know. But the good news is there is a decrease in, well, I don't know if it's good news, in no praise. So if you take away praise very quickly, it jumps back down to lower levels, but not to the lowest level. So how do I know that? Because if you look at the level, the level that would be predicted would be the lowest point of the no praise dot, which is 4. And there's a higher level there. So there is some kind of effect that is what we call irreversible. That means once you've learned a word, potentially, you're probably not going to forget all of them. So in this case, baseline, there's learning, as there should be. In praise, there's better performance, so maybe it's a MO issue. In the next phase, there's a couple words learned extra, but there's no motivation to basically say all the words they knew. Maybe selective mutism, something like that. But there are irreversible effects from words read. People don't forget some words read, so you would expect there to be some increases in the no praise condition from even the intervention in a transference of what the intervention has done. So dual criteria is to present trajectory lines. So baseline was on an increasing trend. So that's that first line that has a gradual increasing line. The next one has a 0 with tokens, and there's a massive decreasing trend. So I have confidence that I reverse the direction. And when I take away the intervention, it goes back to an increasing trend, and then it goes back to a decreasing trend when I put the DRO plus tokens back again. There is a shift, and the shift is sizable. It's a big drop. the level trend was about 18, and then it's about 8.5 or 9 with the intervention. So there's a big decrease in intervention, and there's a consistent decrease in intervention, even though there's an increase in trend for the DRO without tokens. So what we can say there was a transference between the DRO with tokens and the DRO without tokens. And DRO stands for direct reinforcement of other behavior. So that's an example of where we say that aggression is the target, and we're going to reinforce anything but aggression. And this is kind of not always the best, because sometimes the person could be engaging in some other behavior we don't like. Maybe they're sleeping or off task, but they still get tokens. So it's not always best, but in some severe cases, you want to start with a DRO or NCR, which is non-contingent reinforcement. And that's just ensuring that the person is receiving praise. And if someone does aggress for attention and they're getting praise every 5 seconds, the motivation for attention will drop, but they haven't necessarily learned an alternative skill. A DRO basically causes a depression in a target behavior while gaining access to reinforcement for a class of other behaviors. And we don't know what the class could be. It could be many classes. It could be non-compliance. It could be on-task behavior. It could be it's anything but aggression. But DRAs, direct reinforcement alternative, target a behavior that is going to access the reinforcer that aggression was accessing. So aggression for attention, the DRA is request for attention. Aggression to escape demands, the DRA is going to be requests for breaks. So allowing to be off task once work is done. So DRAs are obviously better than DROs, and DRAs are usually better than DRIs, which are direct reinforcement incompatible behavior. So aggression, say someone hits someone with their hands, open fist, then DRI is going to be sitting on your hands. It's incompatible, but it's not socially valid because not everyone has to do those kind of self-restraining practices. A DRA is optimal because it facilitates functional communication training. That would be an example of requesting an item, requesting attention, requesting a break, asking to go to a room so you can engage in self-symmetry behavior. So those are examples of hitting functions that aggression might, because sometimes it feels good. Something on your fist, on your punching a punching bag, feeling a little bit raw. That's an example of automatically reinforced behavior. So a DRO is direct reinforcement of anything but aggression. In this case, we're using tokens. If every 15 minutes, so this could be a partial interval, there is no example of aggression, maybe a token is received. And it's important to refine your token system so that it ensures that you're not giving too many, because you get what is called breakfast in bed. They'll start working for you for like the first couple sessions. Their tokens are so rich, they can then access their reinforcer bin throughout the day and they can be off task. So it should be dense enough that they are working consistently throughout the intervals and not having like the end of the day being off task and just buying things from the token bin. So the economy essentially is how you don't have inflation, because that means you're not earning enough tokens and they're not able to access reinforcers, and don't have like too dense of a schedule because you'll have breakfast in bed. So we do a bit of stats effects. If a behavior has a chance of going up and down 50% equally, each time it goes down, that is going to be a 50% chance that it will go up or down. If it goes down consistently one direction, well, 0.5 is the 50% to the power of 5. Well, what's the chances of probability of that effect? It's 0.03 or 3% chance that would happen. So that's pretty cool, but it doesn't even tell us about effect size, which is that direction right here could be here. So even if it goes down 18 to 16, that's still 0.5 to the power 5 with all the directions going down, but the effects that could drop is actually quite substantial. So talking about probability, we can actually look at graphs when we do visual analysis. We are doing stats, but we're doing it in our heads. What's the chance of that? Low. You can say low. You can say, what's the chance of it all going up in a row? Low. That's 6% chance that would have gone up in a row. And the effect size talks about, this is the lowest point. So DRO plus tokens in the last intervention, it has never achieved in the history of this person, and maybe across many interventions previously, they have never achieved a frequency of 2 per day, for example, or 2 per session. And so this is very powerful demonstration of effects. It's the lowest in their history. It could be an irreversible effect. We're getting to the point where they're accessing other reinforcers. And so the main things to visual analysis that interfere with how we interpret it is how we explain our data. So how we organize the narrative, how we choose particular graph elements. Do I use circles for aggression each time and squares for property destruction? Well, that will help for being consistent and looking at my graphs between different clients. How we build the graph is very important, making sure we get those ratios, and how we send our data across different platforms. One of my biggest pet peeves is someone selling me a Microsoft graphic chart object and they have a Mac, and then they send it to me and it's all out of whack because I have a Microsoft platform. And my PC is like, what just happened? So sometimes it's better to send an image because we can avoid compatibility issues. So that could be a PDF or a PNG. But it's important to note that even the choice that we use can actually degrade the image. So another way that it can be degraded is through overlapping data, and we'll go over some processes to avoid overlapping data. Data falling the axes, and we covered kind of a little bit of that, how to avoid data falling the axes. Session data versus date data. I recommend date data where possible and putting your session data in a separate tab and maybe averaging for your date data. And then you can drill in to the session data later as needed. It's important that you don't chart continuous with discrete data. So continuous is going to be data along the same lines. Discrete is going to be data that shouldn't be connected. So I can't chart a bar chart with aggression, property destruction, and self-interest behavior and have them in one line because they're all different behaviors. And we talked about drawn-in features being avoided where possible and using visual aids. So here's an example of standardizing our graph. So this is the graph with nondescript labels and deceptive y-axes because the y-axis is way too big. So the first thing I can do is change the labels. Tokens, praise, token plus praise. I've also got a data point that needs to be separated through the phase change line. And I also have to make sure that this data isn't distorted. So I mentioned before that we can create a chart object by going to the tab at the bottom, which has a plus sign, and then going to insert chart and using that instead of putting our data inside the spreadsheet. So for this graph, we also have a way to break the graph I showed you by one, you can actually click on the data point and say no line. It's a little slow. I'm not a fan of that method. The other method I showed you was breaking the number NA, which is that error variable that kind of links it. It says there's a number here. I don't know what the number is, but I'm going to link between these graphs. The good chart elements for this are going to be the tick marks are on the outside and there are no overlapping data points. Sometimes this happens, which is really annoying because I already copied the graph. So then I'm doing copy cell and I'm deleting this because something weird, this is an example of a glitch again. So I go here, I copied the cell because I just copied the graph, and then I'm going to a clean chart with nothing in my copy tab. And now it's clean. So I wanted to show that as like a quirky thing Excel did because I had already copied the graph. Then I went to insert chart and it gave me a weird graph. So then I'm adjusting the graph right now to change my minimum value, get rid of the distortion because it's a percentage, get it to 0 to 100. And then I'm going to copy it into the chart object without that distortion that was there before. It looks a little better. I can do some housekeeping, change the tabs to be better, easy to see, underline it, change the Times New Roman, which is usually preferential for the purposes of looking at graphs. Move the aggression so it's not right on the y-axis, kind of adjust it, kind of get the right spot. We change the size so it's easy to see. But once you've made these changes, you don't have to go back and forth to make these changes again. So get some clean graphs, the graphs that you'd like, and adjust them to how you like them. Then don't keep formatting, because once you've got the format, why do you have to change your data point from a circle to a square? Keep aggression consistent. Keep that as the data point for aggression. That way you can look at your graphs more easily. And other people will be able to look at your graphs more easily and see kind of what you see when you look at them. So here, it's not as easy to see that big change now, because now you see it's actually a lot less of an effect, because before it was only going from 60 to 100, or a much more marginal direction. So in this, we're never going to chart continuous data. We're never going to chart the line graph. So I'm never going to connect aggression, property destruction, and self-interest behavior, pica, and rumination. This is an example of a terrible graph. This is not an amazing graph, but it's more correct, because these are separate behaviors that most likely could be separate in a sequence of events, separate in terms of function. They could have different maintaining variables that cause them. So don't link them like that, because it doesn't tell me anything, right? This just tells me a snapshot at one point in time. Maybe it's like the aggregate for baseline, and then I'm going to present on another bar chart the aggregate after the intervention. Maybe I'm doing it for a presentation. I don't know. When you want x-axis, when you want text on the x-axis, a line chart is actually better. So I don't talk about that because it's very rare that that happens. When your x-axis is continuous interval data, I recommend using the scatter. And I think the session data is better for gaps. So when you actually have a gap in the data, that will be worse off in the line chart than the scatter chart. And for the combo chart, if you need a line chart, you can integrate it into a scatter bar chart, or you can integrate it to a scatter line chart. So doesn't mean you don't have, you can completely avoid the line chart if you don't want to. You can use it if you want to. I think it's important to organize your data for charting, make sure it's easy for you to see. I like to put my session data on the left, or my date data on the left. That's going to be on your x-axis. And I like to put my phase change line data next. And then I like to put my behavioral data next. And so we already went over how there's one step extra you have to do with the line chart in terms of removing the series data. So that's why I go straight to the scatter. It's more accurate, and we get more bang for your buck. So here's an example of the creation of the phase change line. And I'm actually going to just skip ahead because we actually covered this, most of it. So this is the phase change line and label, which we did not cover. How do you add the phase change label? Well, if you click on the data point, and this is the reason why I said keep the data point until you're completely finished, because it makes it way easier to add a phase change line label. You right click on the label and there'll be an option that says add data label. And so the cool thing about that, you click right there and you say add data label, and then it'll create almost like a text box. Where I'm actually using a text box to have a phase change label. And so this is the old way. My template skips this completely. So if you want to do it this way, that's fine. I'm not a big fan of putting drawn in features, but you can actually draw a text box in and do it this way. But you can also use a phase change label, which I use in my templates, which means that as you move it, it doesn't move around for your graph. See if I can skip ahead. So that's the phase change line label. So let's go to the right click I mentioned, then add data labels. It immediately puts the value in. So as a default, this will be the point where it adds in like the y-axis variable, and then you can make it equal a cell. So in this case, I made it equal select data. But I'm going to go over most of these like in-depth points for the next lecture in part 2. You've got the basics of creating the phase change line and label. You've got the basics to creating a data label, and you've got the templates which you can mess around with. I encourage you to do that because it's going to really help as we get to creating 2 y-axes and then actually going to all the fun stuff from the template. which I hope so saves time. And the reason why I'm offering out there, it's like I don't have any monetary interest in, I'm not selling anything. I just want you to save time and work with your clients. So like, if you make money off it, good for you. You can then sell it on the template, and there's nothing stopping you guys doing that, like creating a website and then just like saying, hey, here's this template, sell it. I don't care. I think there are going to be apps out, behavior analytic apps for graphing in the future. I don't think we're quite there yet. I actually took some time to plot that question mark. I actually manually plotted that question mark for fun, except that line there. I got lazy, and that line at the bottom that joins to that dot, these two are drawn in. So that's where I got lazy right there. So,
This has been a really rich presentation. And I noted to everybody in the beginning that it's an advanced training topic, and there were certainly components of it that I think were very advanced. All of it to me, because I'm just such a data and behavior analysis geek, I just found to be quite fascinating. It gave some in-depth information that might have been some that was very educational for folks. It might have been old hat for others, but I think it also mixed in some really nice instruction and resources that could be taken and used in community settings as well, which is probably what the majority of folks on the call are doing, at least as the location they're providing services at. I think everybody's probably really excited too about that Excel template that you demoed and that you're going to give more information on today. I saw a question in the chat box about how to access that.
I'm going to put it in the link for everyone.
Okay. Excellent.
And I sent an email out as well. I might have had some mail undeliverable, but what I'll do is if you guys are still on, I'll put it in the link right now. And that's the Dropbox link. And I will be updating it to include the goals, because again, it just shows you what the afterthoughts are. Like, you build something and then you're like, well, that would be nice. And you're like, oh, I should add that. But that's kind of how it works. This template for me is like, I find something, people email me, tell me like, I've got this problem. How do you present this? How do you depict this story? And then you figure it out. And so that's the art in it. Like I haven't figured it all out, and I know you guys have had, like, you saw demonstrations where I'm like, what, why is this happening? And I experienced the same frustrations with Excel that everyone else does. And there are some better people. There's some people that blog on Excel. Mr. Excel is excellent. If you guys look at his blog, and it's not just behavior analytic. These people are doing really advanced data analysis at like metadata that I have. I'm still working towards. I want to be able to do that, but there are some people, and there are some blogs and forums integrating coding in Excel. Like there's a code that I'm trying to access right now and figure out that moves the data label when it overlaps. So if it detects an overlap and the text is, so in my Excel template, you can still put labels next to each other and they'll overlap, and you have to manually move the data label. And so there are codes that will say, hey, coordinate overlap, jostle here, jostle until no overlap, rather than some manually clicking that data label and moving it. So I haven't figured it all out.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be mindful of everybody's time. I know I could continue to sit here and listen for another hour at least. And Dr. Deshand also has other things that he has responsibilities for at University of Cincinnati today. So just real quick. Before we sign off.
They don't work me enough.
Okay, he's ready to just stay here for hours and hours and take questions and show how to demo graphs. Does anybody have any questions for him before we sign off at this point?
I cannot copy the link. So Deborah said she can't copy the link. Can you just try clicking on it? Will that work? Chris, Jordan, we should have CEUs for everyone in attendance. So anyone that's on the, it's typed in their name, I'll make sure they get it. And I have the video recorded too. So you mentioning that, I definitely be able to get you CEUs. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Michael Neimer, for adding yourself to the list. That way I can put people in and make sure they're plugged in, that they were in attendance. And thank you, all the people that are working on behavioral graphing that aren't BCBAs. Like one of the big claims to fame is graphing. People but it isn't fun. And like no one, I mean, I mean, people say it's fun. I say, oh, it's kind of a claim to fame by saying it's fun. But we all know that there are frustrations doing this. And if there's a way to save on that, like it requires me to just listen to what problems you have in terms of graphing. So if you guys think of any, email to Nathan or me, and I'll add it to the presentation upcoming. Like the goal thing.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks for that consideration and flexibility with trying to provide the information that meets the needs of the learners. I really appreciate that.
All right. I'm grateful for you guys attending. I hope it wasn't too advanced, or if I got carried away at any point, and if you need clarification, again, you can email me. I'm available. I'm a real person.